Hello again, everybody, and roll tide. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you to this episode of Crimson Drive, presented to you by Coca-Cola, as we're in the final week of preseason preparation for Alabama football. Next week, we'll, of course, look ahead to Alabama's first game against Miami. It will truly be game week. And one programming note, this show, Crimson Drive, will no longer just be on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page. Starting next week and going all throughout football season, this show will be twice a week, easy to remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock Central, right here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page. But it's now time to dive into our headlines as we use our smart board presented to us by RJ Young. And RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. Taking a look at what is coming up on the show today, we'll start by talking some football with Aaron Suttles of The Athletic. He covers Alabama for The Athletic and really has great insight on this Alabama football camp. We'll also be talking some volleyball this weekend. The Alabama volleyball team will start its season, so it's time to check in with the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Lindsey Devine. Finally, we'll hear from Coach Saban, his press conference from last night, kind of detailing where the team is at this point of preseason, and we'll let you watch some football practice footage as well. Also coming up, as I mentioned, the football team as we continue to go into our headlines, presented to you by RJ Young. Final week preseason camp for the Alabama football team as all the game week prep will start next Monday, getting ready for the Miami Hurricanes. 15 players were named to the preseason coaches, all SEC teams. Really, Evan Neal, Will Anderson Jr. leading all of the players that are receiving a lot of honors, but still an impressive 15 players for the Tide. You had 7 on the first team, 4 on the second team, also 4 made the third team. So great to see that for the Crimson Tide football team and the Miami Hurricanes. Everybody's starting to get in that Miami mindset because September 4th in Atlanta, it's the season opener between Alabama and Miami. Take a look at the Crimson Tide soccer team as Wes Hart's group returns to the pitch coming up this weekend. Of course, last Thursday got the season started at home against Jacksonville State. Pretty solid debut for the Crimson Tide with a 4-0 win over the Gamecocks. On Sunday, Alabama had a really tough task, going to Tallahassee, playing the number 1 team in the country, the Florida State Seminoles, team that finished second in the nation last year. FSU did get the win 4-0, but talked with Coach Hart earlier today. His group really learned a lot about the Crimson Tide and kind of what they need to work on in that match, and they probably will not see a team as talented as Florida State the rest of the season. So, a couple of tests coming up this week for the Crimson Tide. First of all, tomorrow night, home against the Lamar Cardinals. That'll be at 7 p.m. Then on Sunday, a quick turnaround for that match against the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. You can watch both of those matches on SEC Network Plus. And finally, the Alabama volleyball team, of course, this weekend, they get going. The season will start at the Marshall Invitational coming up with 2 matches tomorrow against Austin P at 10 a.m., Marshall coming up at 5 o'clock, Marshall the host of that tournament. Then Saturday, a matchup with Miami of Ohio before the Crimson Tide head home. And then after that, we'll be at home at Foster Auditorium hosting a weekend tournament next weekend. And coming up in just a little bit, we will be talking with the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Lindsey Devine, to get her thoughts on everything coming up for the Alabama volleyball team. But first, we'll start talking some Crimson Tide football, and Aaron Suttles has been covering the Crimson Tide pretty much all throughout the Nick Saban era, has a real great insight on what this football team needs to do at this point of fall camp and getting ready for the season opener. So we'll start with our interview with Aaron Suttles of The Athletic as you watch Crimson Drive, presented to you by Coca-Cola. Aaron, since August 6th, when practice started for the Crimson Tide, have we learned much about this Alabama football team?
Well, I think we know now because of some injuries and the way that some of the scrimmages have been handled. I think the offensive line, there's a lot more competition maybe than we thought heading into fall camp. I think people feel a little better after hearing Nick Saban talk about the defensive line, how much depth there is going to be in that rotation. And that's just, that's even with, unfortunately, LeBron Ray being injured again. So I think there's that. And I think, Alabama fans have a very high standard, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And, let's just call a spade a spade. The last few years, Alabama's defense has not been what it had been. It was still good enough to win a lot of football games, but not been where it had been. And I think Henry To'o, I'm still learning that pronunciation. I'm sure you've got it down by now.
Right.
But I think him coming in and Nick Saban saying, making the calls, which allows Christian Harris to sort of be more comfortable. And they're in the middle. They're sort of the dad of that group. I think them playing well, and then with what we know what Will Anderson's going to be, I think there's a lot of optimism on the defense this year.
You mentioned some of the injuries, and you had that pretty early on in your scrimmage 2 recap that's available online on The Athletic. Anybody in that group you're really worried about for the season opener in Miami that wouldn't be able to play?
I think Kendall Randolph may be the one guy. Having had a lot of ankle injuries myself, I know that can be very nagging and it can stick around a while. And Kendall, you feel bad for him because he's a guy that's been in the program a long time, has done everything they've asked him to do. He's played that sort of hybrid offensive tackle, tight end role that they'll bring in goal line situations. And the fact that he was maybe in position to sort of earn a starting role, at least early in the season at right tackle, for him to get hurt and maybe not have that, you feel a little bit bad for him. So his availability is one. I think DeMarco Helms, who also had an ankle injury back there in the secondary, his availability and when he will be available will be, but otherwise not really overly concerned about the other injuries that we've seen through those 2 scrimmages.
Everyone wants to talk about the quarterback competition, and Bryce Young has been getting the first team reps all throughout camp. Saw that in the spring as well. Just from everything you've heard, what is he doing well at the moment, and what do you expect from him on September 4th against Miami?
I think it's important that Bryce that the moment's not too big for him. One, we saw him in the first time in front of media, and people. I think you can read a lot by how someone handles being in front of the media. And I think especially a quarterback, how you command the room. And he didn't fidget. He wasn't rocking back and forth. He was very locked in. And I know those are sort of maybe ridiculous things to talk about in terms of a player just doing a press conference, but I think it's bigger than that. It shows intangible stuff that I think Bryce has. And I think being able to, not ask too much of yourself. Don't go up there and expect to be the next Max Jones or be the next Tua. You just be Bryce, because those teams that Tua and Mac run were a little different. They had a lot of weapons on offense. This offense is rebuilding. So I don't think the moment's too big for Bryce. I don't expect him to come out and put up, 300 or 400 yards passing. I just think he's going to manage the offense, keep them in good down and distance situations, protect the football. And that's really all they need. And then as he grows into that, we'll see more and more. But I think he's done enough to have earned a lot of confidence from his coaching staff. And he's done so in 2 scrimmages, as I mentioned earlier, where the offensive line has been in flux this fall camp. So once he gets there and he gets his group together, they'll provide, the play action passing game for him. They'll provide plenty of time to pass. But I think it's early on not to expect Bryce to come out and put too much pressure on himself.
Looking at Alabama's running backs, of course, Brian Robinson Jr. is the elder statesman of that group, but who else has really shined during a preseason camp in that room?
I think Jace McClellan. I think that guy's going to be special. And Alabama fans have had a lot of great running backs you can judge from, but he's just got another element than Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is very much a north-south runner. He's going to do everything right. He's not going to get your quarterback killed if he's asked to be in pass protection. So I think Brian is sort of the elder statesman of that group, and he's earned the right to sort of be the running back one if there is one. But I think Jace McClellan right off of that has had a really solid fall camp. I think it was good that we saw, or at least we've heard, that Trey Sanders is back. That was a scary car accident he was in last year that could have gone a lot differently for him. So the fact that he's back, I don't know if he's back to his former self, but we saw him in limited action last year. I think he's back to that form. And then obviously Roydell Williams, kid from here in the Birmingham area, he makes up a great rotation that they have. But I'm really excited to see Jace McClellan get 10, maybe if he gets a game where he 10, 15 carries, what he can do.
Well, looking at the wide receivers, of course, John Mechie III has been kind of wide receiver one, it seems like, all throughout camp, joined by Slade Bolden, Jamison Williams, who transfers in from Ohio State. How about the young wide receivers? Are they going to make that competition interesting for reps?
I think so. Especially as of over the last week and a half, we've heard the name JoJo Earl a lot, and we'll probably see him some in the return game. But I think they're that slot receiver. He may be taking some opportunities away from Slade Bolden. And Slade's going to play a lot. He's earned that opportunity. He's an experienced football player, knows what to do. But I think JoJo Earl obviously is just a very skilled, very athletic receiver, and that's what Alabama needs. That's why they went out and got Jamison Williams. They needed speed at the wide receiver position. I think Jamison's going to bring that. But young guys, I think we're all anxious after we saw an A-Day, I think it's how you say it, Agiye Hall.
Agiye Hall, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy in A-Day. Everyone's been so over the moon about it. We haven't really heard much about him in fall camp. Doesn't mean that he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing and we won't see him, but maybe not as much as we were sort of led ourselves to believe after A-Day. I think JoJo Earl's one to watch.
Well, and speaking of players we expected to see hear a lot about after last season, everyone was looking towards the tight end position and Jaleel Billingsley, and he's been in the news a lot during preseason camp because Coach Saban has talked about different things he needs to do. Just what's his status right now, and what do you expect from him early on?
I think Nick Saban sent him a wake up call. He's done it twice now during the fall camp, and it's up as Coach Saban said, it's up to Jaleel to answer that call. I mean, Nick's not being hard on him. He's being hard on him, but he's not being mean to him. He's saying, listen, you are really talented, and you've got this opportunity in front of you if you do X, Y, Z. You're not doing X, Y, Z the way that your teammates are doing X, Y, Z. And I think Nick Saban even said it in the press conference as much. It's costing Jaleel a little respect in the locker room because players are looking to him, and he's not handling his business the way he should be. That doesn't mean that he's a big discipline problem. It doesn't mean he's going to get kicked off the team or anything like that. It just means he's not doing things the process way. And Nick Saban called him out for it. And, it's funny because he did the same thing to Jordan Battle in the spring. I asked about Jordan Battle, the safety, about his leadership and how he had he ascended to that role where he was comfortable in leadership. And Nick Saban said, basically, not to the point that we want him to. And then I asked Nick Saban about Jordan Battle this past scrimmage, and he gave a great answer. So Jordan got called out and answered it. I think that's up to Jaleel now. Like, coach has called you out twice. Are you going to be a competitor and the man to step up and meet that challenge? Or are you just going to keep doing things the way you've been doing and getting called out in the media?
And it seems like there's a pattern of that all throughout the Saban area. There are examples you can point to of these great stars that had something like this early in their Alabama career.
Yeah, and listen, I think it speaks to how good Jaleel can be. Because Nick Saban's probably not going to take the time if you're not expected to be a contributor or to be that player they want you to be. He's not going to waste his time with you. He's probably going to get rid of you. And so I don't think it's risen to that level yet. I just think Jaleel is dealing with a little immaturity, which we forget sometimes these guys are in college. But I think it's costing Jaleel respect from his teammates. That's a big thing, one. But Nick Saban's done it to a ton of players, and most of those players have risen to the challenge. Some don't, and some aren't on the program anymore. They go other places, you never hear from them again. But I think Jaleel, he's just that tight end that everyone, not just locally, we all know about him here in the state, but nationally, he had done so well that he was starting to get a little hype. And I think maybe he bought into that a little bit. And I think as long as he just takes it back down to the grassroots and starts doing the day-to-day stuff, practice, go hard in practice, I think he'll be fine.
Well, there's a lot of hype on Will Anderson Jr. based on what he did last year. And it seems like in the last few weeks, Aaron, there's been even more hype building up about the disruptive force he can be. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, and I just spent a couple days over in Hampton, Georgia, where he's from. So I got a story coming out on him this Saturday. I can't tell you. Listen, I love my job. I get to document a lot of great athletes. But at the height of my job, what I love the most is when I get to tell a story about a good player who's also a good person. And Will Anderson's a great football player. He may be a Hall of Fame person. He is that type of young man, and it's cool to see where they come from and where they get that from. But I've been asked several times, is he the best defender of the Nick Saban era? I mean, he's only played one season. That's the sort of hype that's building around him, and I think it's warranted based on what we're hearing out of practices, what we're hearing out of scrimmages. I mean, there was a total that was given to me the other day that he might have had 7 sacks in scrimmage number 2. Now, they don't keep those stats officially, but people are watching, and sometimes the quarterback's not live. You touch him, it's counted as a sack. But the point remains, he is a disruptive force in the opposition's backfield. And I would not like to be an offensive coordinator or an offensive line coach trying to come up with a scheme to block him or Christopher Allen or Chris Braswell or Drew Sanders. They're going to make life miserable for a lot of quarterbacks this year.
Well, Will Anderson had a lot of hype before he even played a game at Alabama, and the same could be said right now on this team with KoolAid McKinney for all the name, image, and likeness attention he's brought with the KoolAid sponsorship. But on the field, what's he doing well right now, and could he be an impact player from game one?
I think he's going to have a role early in the season. It depends on how he grows and how he handles that does he earn a starting job, right? Because but the fact that he's even put himself in that position so quickly at that position, I mean, there are a lot of positions you see a lot of freshmen play. Wide receivers, one. We've seen freshman quarterback play. We've seen freshman wide receivers, running backs, all that. You don't see a ton of freshman cornerbacks because that's sort of Nick Saban's baby. So he's right there coaching you up. And they run sort of a complicated scheme. And the fact that KoolAid has put himself in position to even be talked about being a major contributor to this team is sort of how skilled he is and how he's learning it. But I think game one we'll see him. I don't know how much, but I would be surprised if by the end of the season he doesn't have a major role in this team.
Well, you mentioned you're working on a story on Will Anderson coming up. That'll be online on The Athletic coming up Saturday. Do you just love the fact that you're able to tell stories the way you are in The Athletic? It doesn't have to be just your run-of-the-mill practice reports or kind of the short bites you maybe would have in a newspaper. How much do you enjoy kind of the deep dives you get to do with your job?
Love it, and that's no knock to the guys and girls that are on the grind every day going to practices. There's a lot of value in that, but you sort of can get that everywhere. And I like the fact that I was able to go learn who the real Will Anderson is, and the fact that I hopefully get to share it with everyone else who already knows he's a great football player. They know that, and they're going to see it coming up a lot this season. But the fact that everyone I talked to said, yes, great football player, but better human being. That sort of, to me, the fact that I get to tell those stories is rewarding to me, because we don't, sometimes we don't, especially with COVID, we don't get to see these players maybe like we used to. We don't get to know them, quote unquote, like we used to. So when we can draw the curtain back a little bit and give the fans a glimpse into who these people are, who these guys are, it's always rewarding to me.
And The Athletic's such a great resource, too, not just for your day-to-day coverage of Alabama, but you look at the national college football writers on your roster right now: Bruce Feldman, Nicole Auerbach, Andy Staples. You can go on down the list, Stuart Mandel. If you want to know about realignment and every name, image, likeness, everything going on in college football, you guys have been on top of it all summer.
Yeah, and it's been a busy summer, as you mentioned. I mean, this might be the most disruptive, transformative history era of college football ever, and it happened all within a couple months. From, as you mentioned, name and image likeness, conference expansion, college football playoff expansion, all of that has happened this offseason. So to have the the sources built in from national writers that have their finger on the pulse has been we have a Slack channel, so every day it's like, what's going to happen next? I'm just looking in to see what's about to hit, and it's just been crazy.
Any real reaction to the alliance announced yesterday by the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12?
Desperation, because they didn't really release any plans. Just, we have the future plans to work together. And I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're not going to honor your commitments to future contracts playing the SEC? I think the SEC has a lot of people running scared right now, because the SEC just added 2 legacy programs that increased its value. And I think, and probably rightfully so, if you're one of these other conferences, you're wondering about your place in that sort of landscape, and you have to do what you have to do to secure that. But the fact that they are sort of blaming the SEC is comical to me, just because the SEC, listen, if someone's going to hand you legacy programs, you're going to take them. And so that's what the SEC did. I'm curious to see what becomes of the Big 12, how the Pac-12 can make itself relevant again. I think the Big 10 is in pretty good hands, but the ACC certainly needs other programs to step up and help Clemson out a little bit. So, their future is in their own hands. And the fact that they called it the alliance, it feels like a wrestling gimmick, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like that Hulk Hogan and Hollywood Hogan just stepped onto the scene to defeat the big bad SEC. It's the name of it and the way it was hyped made it certainly kind of laughable.
Well, definitely. It'll be interesting to see what the future is there. But we look forward to Alabama's future, and we look forward to reading about it, of course, in The Athletic. Aaron, you do great work covering the Crimson Tide, and thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Aaron Suttles really dialed into everything going on with the Alabama football team. Again, catch his work on The Athletic. Really can't wait for that story he has coming up about Will Anderson Jr. saying he's a better person off the field than he is on the field. On the field, we know he's going to be one of the best players in the Southeastern Conference and in the nation this year. So thanks to Aaron for joining us to talk about some Crimson Tide football as Alabama starts the season September 4th against Miami. Starting the season tomorrow, the Alabama Crimson Tide volleyball team, led by head coach Lindsey, Devine, as Alabama heads to Marshall to participate in the Marshall Invitational. And before the Crimson Tide hit the road, she joined us to talk about the start of the season for Alabama. Coach, you got to be excited that year number 3 is almost here.
Oh, absolutely. It was a different year last year, so I feel like we're kind of back on the path to being normal. So we're very excited.
Certainly are excited. And of course, all volleyball teams go through a spring where they do have some matches against some other schools, but it usually doesn't count in the standings like we saw it did last year. Just what was that experience like? And did it change the summer off season at all for you?
Well, obviously it was something that our players and myself had never experienced, having a split season. And so the spring was a time that we had to compete. We were playing in those conference matches, and it was an opportunity for our team to go out and play hard. So, but we had to also play in the fall. So management recovery was really important through this season. So going back to now this year, it's a little different, but we're going to be able to draw upon those experiences that we faced last year.
And what is a typical summer like for your student athletes? So what kind of strength and conditioning program do they go through? When do they start volleyball activities?
For us, they finished school around the first week of May, went home, enjoyed some home time. They did a fantastic job of continuing to get into their gyms back at home. There was a strength program in place for them to work on when they were back home. Then they returned back here to Alabama the end of June, beginning into July, where they worked into captain's practices. And then they had some voluntary workouts with our strength coach. So before you knew it, they were back here on campus. Not much of a summer, but I think that they were really hungry to get back here.
And for you as well, last summer spent pretty much, I imagine, the entire time in Tuscaloosa. Were you able to go on the road a little bit more recruiting? And what was that like to kind of get back to normal and seeing a lot of elite high school volleyball players again?
Well, getting back into the recruiting, which we had that opportunity this summer, was a little challenging. You know, we weren't used to the miles we put on our feet from walking, and then just, you know, refocusing our eyes when you're back into the gym and hearing the whistles and spending the long hours of walking from court to court. But it was fantastic to get back, be able to see colleagues, to get a look at the recruits that we were looking at. It was a busy time for our staff from the middle of June all the way till just after the 4th of July. We were working hard.
And what's the message you're sending to recruits right now about this Alabama program?
That this is a great university. I mean, you know yourself, Roger, you walk around, you meet the people that are not only involved with athletics, but also with the people, our faculty, the people that are the fans of Alabama. You get the opportunity to come across them. You know that there is a pride, there's a love for this university. So if that's what a prospective student athlete is looking for relationships and a college feel and an excellence across the board from all the sports, then this is the place for them. So those are a couple of messages that we tell the students, the student athletes we're talking to. Plus, you know, with all the excitement that went on with the Olympics, volleyball is such a sport right now that should be on, and I know it's on the minds of so many people from what they saw from our USA team and how they came away with gold. And then also, you know, we play in a conference with the national champions. How exciting is that? So you put all that together, you were able to come here to Alabama because of the brand and the relationships, the family, but play in a conference that's strong in volleyball. I think that's a lot of what student athletes are looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the national champions, Kentucky, who I believe is coming to Tuscaloosa later in the year. And for so many years in this conference, it was Florida and kind of everybody else. Just from afar, how did you see Kentucky rise, and what are some lessons maybe to take from their rise in the conference and nationally that can apply to your program?
Well, Craig Skinner and his staff do a fantastic job. You know, I watch from afar when they're out on the recruiting trail. And again, their network with how they have worked with the clubs throughout the country. I think that they, again, base it a lot on relationships. You know what you're going to get when you go to Kentucky. You know that you're walking into a program that has great success. They recruit really wonderful young women who have continued to put their footprint on at Kentucky and then gone beyond the Kentucky years and gone into the professional world. So I think there's lots of things that Kentucky has offered the young women that are looking there, and they were patient. They were diligent in who they wanted to be along in their path. They stuck to it. And I think then the prospective student athletes saw that and they were like, okay, we know what we're going to walk into. There wasn't any surprises.
Well, here at Alabama, now you're gearing up for the 2021 season. And let's talk about this Crimson Tide roster. If we could go position by position, maybe
Sure.
we'll start at the net and then work our way back. What can you tell us about the returning student athletes?
Well, excited. Aaliyah Wells, my goodness, she has done a fantastic job in this off season. I think the spring was a time for her to recognize how important her strength training is and was to her success. And she worked exceptionally hard this summer. So what we've seen in our scrimmages, our practices, is a fiery player who really wants to continue to bring our program to the level that we all want it to be. You add to that Abby Marjama from last year, again, a returner. Abby continues to work hard in the gym, both from the defensive side and the offensive side. She's that crafty individual that you got to be careful because she's got the shots. So opponents have to be aware of that. We added a graduate transfer, Sarah Swanson from TCU. And Sarah brings with her experience, maturity, and she is such a phenomenal blocker. She really understands and reads the opponent, the distribution of the setter. And so she's brought in her experience and has mentored our front line on blocking responsibilities. On the pins, Kennedy McElroy. I mean, Kennedy has the ability to take over a match. She did last year. She's strong. She has such a great court awareness, and I love her competitive side. And then we also have Kendall Ray from last year. Kendall, as a freshman, saw a lot of court time, and I love that what she's done over this past spring and summer. She's recognized some things that she had to work on, and she got back in her gym back home. And then when she came into captain's practices, I see all the steps that she's taken, and now she's implementing it into our practices. So I'm excited to see what she does for us this year. And then a couple of newcomers across the front net would be Sammy Jacobs and Shay Eggleston. Again, they two freshmen came at mid-semester, put the work in, kind of was behind the scenes, saw how everything was working, but they have such a competitive side. They want to see the court, and they were really putting up some good numbers in our scrimmages.
Yeah, you mentioned the newcomers. What's the toughest part of transitioning from high school volleyball or club volleyball to college volleyball, especially when you get to the SEC level?
I think a couple of things. It's the speed of the game, a lot faster in college than in high school and in club. That players across the board are more physical. So they may have got away in high school and club doing something, because they were the best on their team. And so now they come and now they're amongst all the best. And then when you go, they face across the net other people that are older, now they're maybe juniors and seniors that they're going to have to face. So they're going to have to be smarter. They're going to have to continue to grow in their maturity of the game, but they also themselves have to get more physical. And that's when we rely on our strength coach.
Well, Alabama went on the road this past Saturday to Samford in Birmingham for its first exhibition of the year. What'd you learn in that match against the Bulldogs?
I loved our transition game, our middles, and what the work that they have put in with our setters, with Emily Yannick, and we have two new freshman setters, Brooke Slusser and Malia Moore. Everybody saw an opportunity out on the floor, but our middles were able to run attack patterns that Samford was not able to keep up with. So I know that is something that we've worked on, and they saw that we were able to implement it. Our players saw, and they saw it worked, and I know that they're going to continue to buy into that. I also saw that we need to work a little bit more so on our block. Our eyes were a little off on what the information we were gathering from our opponent. So this past week, even though I know it's only 2 days in, we have spent those 2 days working on that, just kind of cleaning up. They know what to do. It's just that they have to watch the right things, gather the information, and then be able to execute. I also thought that last year we were a pretty good serving team. We put some pace on the ball. And I want our players to get back on that service line and have that confidence like they did last year. So we saw those things at Sanford. We saw so many great things, the hustle, the plays where we were such a strong force at the net. Our players really dominated that part. So I love that part. We just got to clean up a couple of things as we head into this weekend.
And you mentioned this weekend, Alabama hitting the road to start the season. The Marshall Invitational matches coming up against Austin Peay, as well as the home team Marshall and then Miami of Ohio. Just what do you want to see the most from the Crimson Tide this weekend?
Play hard, compete. Don't look at the scoreboard. Take care of things on our side. The focuses that we have identified are important to our success, our transition game, that third game, and also to be, kind of that team when an opponent thinks that the ball's dead on the floor, we have somebody who says, heck no, we're going to get that ball up and we're going to be able to position ourselves so that we're going to put that ball back on them, put pressure on them. So a lot of fight, a lot of grit, resilience, and have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, it's going to be a fun weekend for you guys on the road, but then you get to come home to Tuscaloosa for the Crimson Tide Invitational starting next Thursday. And just overall, when you look at this home schedule, what excites you the most about being back at Foster Auditorium against some great competition all throughout the year?
Well, I think for our players and for myself, when you walk out onto the floor and to be able to look into the stands and to see familiar faces, not only from your family and friends, but loyal supporters, but then it's just a sense of pride when you see other Alabama fans wearing the crimson red and the Alabama script A. It's such a feeling. So I want that for our players, for the new ones, the ones that have been here. They know what it's like. They need to honor and play with a sense of pride because it's our home court. So it's great to be home, and we're excited to be able to play in front of our fans.
Well, Coach, we can't wait. Again, the season starts in West Virginia at the Marshall Invitational this weekend. Just best of luck, safe travels on the road, and thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you go on with us a lot more throughout the year here on Crimson Drive. Roll Tide.
I appreciate it so much, Roger. Roll Tide.
Enjoyed talking volleyball with Coach Devine. Now let's go back to football as we get ready for Alabama's season opener against Miami on September 4th. Coach Saban addressed the media last night. Now we want to play you his opening comments as he kind of summed up where Alabama is at this point of fall camp.
Look, I guess the state of the situation that we're in here in the middle of practice, still not in game week. Even in the scrimmage on Saturday, you evaluate, the effort, the resiliency. People can't be overwhelmed by their circumstance. You get overwhelmed by constantly talking about, negative things, how I feel, how tired I am, whatever it is. And, fall camp practice at this time of year without playing a game every week is very challenging. And when you talk about that stuff all the time, it just creates an epidemic of the poor me's. All right, and the season is going to create tremendous challenges. Challenges in every game. I mean, we got lots of losable games that we play, lots of challenges out there, whether playing home or on the road. And you got to have resiliency to be able to overcome difficult circumstances. And that's one of the things that, fall camp is designed, to do for players. The mental toughness, the self-discipline that you need to be able to make good choices and decisions about what you do and what you don't do, and sense of purpose, driven quality. All right, something is really, really important to me. All right, and I'm going to make the choices and decisions now to create the right habits so that I have a chance to be successful and do the right things. And I think we're still, working on that with a lot of our players. We got some guys that do a great job of that. Set a good example for that, but we got a lot of players who still get overwhelmed, by their feelings, and we're going to do everything we can to get more and more players on our team to have the kind of mindset that you need to be able to sustain difficult circumstances and overcome adversity in games and challenges in games that's sure to come. So that's one of the things that we're really working on right now.
So that was Coach Saban last night after Alabama's Wednesday practice, and now we want to take you actually to the practice field. Actually, Alabama was in the Hank Crisp indoor facility earlier in the week. Here's some of the sights and sounds from football practice as, again, the Crimson Tide are in their final week of preseason camp before next week starting game week preparations against Miami.
Got the price.
All right, now it's going 3-4. That's it. You're still playing that guy man to man.
I'm not ready.
Double pinch or TE. See what I'm saying? I'm going to run the TE. So he's going to come out to Evan. Evan's going to take a step. Right? As soon as this guy comes this way, boom, Evan's locked. As soon as you take a step, you lead, you look. All right? Let's say if he went inside, you go inside, Evan takes a step, boom, he's hurt. See what I'm saying?
Ready.
Whoa. Good. Hip to hip?
Yep.
Good. Don't come off.
Yeah.
You ought to be able to take him to
Take him and throw him.
Hips together, vertical push. Come off there, right? Everybody good on that? Take the man to the floor.
Doesn't that get you ready for football? I mean, the Crimson Tide had the pads popping, great throws by Bryce Young, all the quarterbacks. You can just tell this team is getting focused, getting fired up, closing out preseason camp the right way, and getting ready for the start of the season on Saturday, September 4th against Miami. This is going to wrap up this edition of Crimson Drive presented to you by Coca-Cola. We want to thank all of you for watching, and don't forget, coming up next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central, we will have our first Tuesday edition of this show, and during football season, will be available to you on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central right here on the CTSN Facebook page to get you caught up on Alabama football. We'll have some soccer and volleyball reports available to you on Wednesdays coming up this year. Just a lot of content's going to be here. Don't forget tonight as well, Hey Coach will be streaming live on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page as Eli Gold is the host. He'll be talking with Wes Hart, Alabama soccer coach, as well as the director of athletics for the Crimson Tide, Greg Byrne from Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa. And we've got a lot more programming headed your way, so this is the right place to be, the Facebook home of the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Got to say a big thank you to our guests that we had on the show today, the Athletics' Aaron Suttles, as well as Alabama volleyball coach Lindsey Devine. Thank you as well to Alabama Athletics for furnishing the video of Coach Saban's press conference, as well as our practice footage. Thanks as always to our producer extraordinaire, Ethan Carabin, putting all of this together, and we can't wait for next week to get here, because then it will be game week as the Crimson Tide look to begin the 2021 football season. Till then, have a great weekend. This has been Roger Hoover saying thank you for watching us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.